We're going to have some fun. Good to see you. All right. Do I have a microphone? Okay. And do I have a remote? We're going to go through tonight and talk. What was the last meeting? 2023, is that right? The last Heartland? 22 or 3? 2. Okay. So much has happened. We're going to go through in a compressed detail of where we are right now. And just spoiler alert, we're at the lowest point of the climate movement's influence and power in the last 50 years. Environmentalism as well. Don't know how long it'll last. But the title is The Great Reject. Triumphant Trump dismantles the climate agenda with nary a pushback. And that is actually the most shocking thing of all. We knew Trump was going to come in. He's gone beyond. Trump 2.0 has blown away Trump 1.0 on every issue, on climate, environment, energy. But what was most shocking this time is the billionaires didn't push back. As I'll mention, they've been co-opted by AI, and they're now peddling against the Green New Deal and promoting fossil fuels. Even Larry Fink is doing that at the World Economic Forum. But the media didn't really push back. Democrats in Congress didn't push back. To give Gavin Newsom credit, he's like the only one who really did somewhat of a pushback. He made the trek to Brazil. Al Gore stays true to the cause, and we'll get to what he's up to. But that's where we're going to begin. So my book was The Great Reset. So at the last meeting, I was talking about a grim world that we were facing under Joe Biden, going along with net zero, build back better. It was this. We were still in the throes of COVID or just coming out of the lockdowns. The World Economic Forum was riding high. It's like one of those old documentaries. He was riding high until drugs and alcohol ruined him. Well, Klaus Schwab was riding high. The pandemic represents the rare, narrow window of opportunity to reset our world. A reset of capitalism. Every country must participate. That's what we were facing. Joe Biden was all in. Justin Trudeau was all in. The European Union was all in. New Zealand, Australia. Basically, they were trying to ration, restrict energy, food, transportation, free speech, ownership, financial system. We were in it deep. So, you'll own nothing, be happy. You all remember that. World Economic Forum took it down the video. Of course, it exists and many people saved it. This became a albatross around their neck. A billion people will be displaced by climate change. Meat would only be an occasional treat. They had it all down. They had the public health merging with climate. They had the entire world scaring everyone. Your spending would be restricted to what the government deemed sensible. In the US, we had Joe Biden taking the steps to make us a central bank digital currency, digital cash. In other words, if you speak out against COVID, lockdowns, as Justin Trudeau did to the Canadian truckers, you wouldn't be able to spend your own money from your own bank account under these kind of systems. They were riding high until the Orange Man. And not Orange Man bad, but Orange Man good. He actually called Davos the promoters, their heirs of yesterday's fortune tellers, which I just thought, foolish fortune tellers. What a great speech he gave in Davos. But we were dealing with the great food reset. China was buying up American land, and they were worried about a Chinese-owned agricultural land monopoly. Now, we haven't necessarily solved it, but at least beginning this year, Trump administration's agriculture, Brooke Rollins, trying to crack down on Chinese ownership of American farmland. We're fighting back. We're making major progress in these areas. This is the great reject. The World Economic Forum, which was riding high. Klaus Schwab, this was hilarious because Klaus Schwab, the founder of the World Economic Forum, author of The Great Reset, was booted by his own organization because he said he did lavish spending at a hotel and expense accounts. I don't buy that for a minute. I don't know what exactly happened, but they didn't want him representing him. So they bring in Larry Fink of BlackRock to take over. He's now the co-chair. And Larry Fink is, of course, very natural there, being with BlackRock, who was all in. He's the one who wanted to force your behavior, so it's a natural move. But World Economic Forum is transforming and trying to reinvent themselves. AI movement. Larry Fink was forced to publicly admit at a World Economic Forum event 2 years ago that AI power demands mean solar and wind aren't tenable anymore. And he actually admits it. They're intermittent power. You need dispatchable power. Gee, maybe this is the reason Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg are trying to buy or lease nuclear power plants now and going all in on fossil fuels and hydrocarbons. There is no way you can still be for the Green New Deal and support the AI power demands that they're having here. But I thought since COVID is now in the past and we're out of the lockdowns, we're out of the Great Reset, one man helped Trump crush climate change. And look, you can take a guess at who it might be, but I think we owe this man a huge debt of gratitude. And I'd like to see a round of applause. Stand up if you feel the need. But are you ready? Anyone? Okay, but here we go. The man who deserves credit for helping Trump crush the climate agenda is this man. Anthony Fauci. In Fauci we trust. These were actual lawn signs that they used in Maryland, all throughout the suburbs during COVID. People loved Fauci. They loved, the more he cracked down. He, of course, famously said, "I am the science." The reason he deserves a round of applause is he destroyed the appeal to authority. And this had tremendous effects. He made everyone question the experts. He was the greatest thing for climate skepticism. If you look, and again, thank you, Dr. Fauci, but by doing this, you can go back and look at Joe Rogan as an example. Joe Rogan would have a climate skeptic on, I'm talking 2017, 2018, and they would talk about it, and he'd say, well, wait a minute, let me check the NASA website. He's like, look, it says right here, NASA, 97% consensus. NASA says it's real, who are you listening to? And that was an appeal to authority. Fast forward, Joe Rogan ran afoul of Anthony Fauci and the horse pace and the whole thing with COVID. He now is one of the biggest climate skeptic voices in the world. Just recently had Will Happer and Dr. Richard Lindzen on. I mean, that is what Anthony Fauci created. And it's a huge thing. And not only with Joe Rogan, but also with RFK Jr. We'll get to. But climate blowback, post-COVID lockdowns, appeal to authority collapses. This is Slate magazine. It's time to give up on facts, lay them down in favor of a more useful emotion weapon, listen to the experts. Questioning authority has become too much of a good thing. Do your own research means following down into a rabbit hole of misinformation. Because of the crushing censorship, because of labeling people domestic terrorists, because of lockdowns, because of mask mandates, because of canceling weddings and funerals, this pissed everyone off, basically. And that's why Anthony Fauci deserves a lot of credit. He even converted RFK Jr. RFK Jr., I interviewed, this is 2014, this is an actual still frame from my interview. He wanted to jail climate skeptics, politicians, he wanted to punish them. He wanted to jail the CEO of energy companies for creating a climate emergency. He apologized for that. In an interview with Reason magazine, he basically said he was wrong and apologized. But in 2023, he's red-pilled. He now declares climate change is being exploited by the World Economic Forum, Bill Gates, in the same way COVID was exploited. Top-down totalitarian controls on society. The only things I differ with him on his view is it was happening back in the 60s when they started, with Paul Ehrlich and overpopulation and all. It was always about top-down controls. But we welcome Robert F. Kennedy Jr. People see that as just another crisis being used to strip mine the wealth of the poor and enrich billionaires. This is the legacy of Anthony Fauci. So Trump has been dismantling us. Everything I'm about to show you is not my opinion or I'm exaggerating it. I'm going to show you mainstream corporate media news sources. This is Bloomberg News. Trump deals climate blow by exiting UN crucial body. Pulling out of the science panel, I love this. Pulling out of the IPCC. I'm unsure how the IPCC can continue without the US. Yeah. There it is. That's the kind of agenda we need. Pete Hegseth, by the way, he quoted one climate, I don't want to call myself an expert on climate, but he quoted one climate person in his book, and it was me, because I was a regular on Fox and Friends when he was a host. He actually cites several paragraphs on climate and attributes it to me in his book before he became defense secretary. But he announced shortly after being sworn in, no more identity months, DEI office, dudes in dresses, no more climate change worship. This was the Department of Defense, which had the Navy, the Army with net zero plans, the solar Navy. Biden was doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Sean Duffy, who's now the acting director of NASA, says climate science will move aside within NASA, and NASA will go back to focusing on space exploration. These are monumental shifts. We had to live for decades with this crap, and it's just like poof in Trump 2.0. New York Times admits the reality. Climate skeptics are winning the information war. Everyone take a bow, because that's this room. They've succeeded in undermining climate action globally. Hey, don't forget about just the US. Since the UN Paris Pact, climate denial has roared back, arguably stronger than ever. This is all the New York Times. Trump's hoax view is cheered by a chorus of influencers online. And welcome the young influencers that we had today. I love that. That's the actual thing. Many fighting climate worry they are losing the information war. You think? When even Bernie and AOC don't talk about. Bernie Sanders was on Joe Rogan, and they used the chart that Emma had of CFAC from University of Knoxville. Same Washington Post chart. Bernie Sanders had made a comment on climate. Joe Rogan presents him with that chart, and then Bernie Sanders goes, I don't know, to change the subject and moved on. Bernie wasn't even interested in pushing climate. And I'll get to it. Greta has even walked away. But this is the chart. So you guys have already seen it. But this was 2024, just showing you where the temperatures are. It's hard to claim a climate emergency when you can look. And this, again, Washington Post. This isn't, a climate skeptic's website that people can criticize. And this upset the alarmists so bad. There's been so many analysis of Joe Rogan and the Bernie Sanders saying this chart proves climate's worse than we thought. They have all these people doing tortured explanations trying to say that this proves the seriousness of climate change. The fact that we're at the coldest period in the last 500,000 years, 485 million. Reuters News, another corporate source, now admits total climate fiasco. Quote, the pursuit of net zero carbon emission has become a resounding failure. Despite trillions of dollars spent, hydrocarbons still account for over 80% of the world's primary energy. What was the first Heartland? 2008? We could have saved them 2 decades of bull bleep. We knew that. What they had to spend, they just came around. This is last year, February. They finally realized the obvious. Media admits Trump is winning. Newsweek, uncommon knowledge. This is uncommon. This may surprise some of you. Trump may be winning the global climate change debate. Really? And by the way, the reason he's winning and not just, he's not just coming in, Lee Zeldin is not just an administrator. And I come as James Inhofe's been a speechwriter, I was the communication director in the Senate. What Trump, Zeldin, and Chris Wright in particular have done is flipped the climate narrative. Unlike George W. Bush, and I'll say it, unlike Trump's first term and EPA directors, they don't accept the UN science. They're not timid. You have Lee Zeldin coming out calling climate a scam, a hoax, a cult, and he does it forcefully. He shuts down the museum. He does it gleefully. He's in the face of reporters. They don't push back. It changes public opinion to the point where Harry Enton on CNN, their CNN pollster, has said that climate change has now reached the lowest level of concern among Americans since the late 1980s. And that is because Donald Trump and his team have flipped the narrative. Unlike George W. Bush's administration, where, climate's serious and real, but China, developing world, where we're not going to do a treat. They were all mealy mouthed, they're terrified. You embrace it, you're in their face, and it changes minds, hearts and minds. And that's the key thing. So yes, Trump is winning the battle. Washington Post, Democrats are going quiet on climate. It's now the big issue Democrats have stopped talking about. This happened during the campaign. Kamala Harris just dropped climate change. They knew for years this was going nowhere. By the way, I watch on YouTube Young Turks, Majority Report, a lot of other left-wing podcasts. And there is almost one time I saw Michael Mann pop up. One of those, I think it was Majority Report, had a climate segment in the last year. They have just been silent. I mean, the mainstream liberal outlets, I'm talking about even the online influencers, just don't even, it's not even on their radar anymore. It's like they just walked away from it. Climate change is out, energy affordability is in, and that's what they're trying, which is funny, because then you see Catherine Hochul, the governor of New York, getting attacked by some environment. She's not meeting the climate goals anymore. She's worried about grid security and affordable energy, which is amazing. Okay. Craig Rucker and Peter Murphy of CFAC and I went down to COP30 in Belém, Brazil, where some estimates are 80% of the people in the city, very poor country, very poor city. Well, not poor country necessarily, but very undeveloped and bad infrastructure. Up to 80% of the residents didn't have adequate plumbing. So the UN, first of all, has a fire go on. This was the great image of this whole UN. That's the actual UN inside the summit. They set up about 8 football fields of tents. Even Politico, again, look at the sourcing here, sad, sorry state of COP, which is Conference of Parties, UN Climate Summit. New York Times, climate talks and dire warnings of scant plan for action. It was all just nonsense. UN hypocrisy. Top UN climate official demanded Brazilians' climate summit fix inadequate air conditioning. These were the climate activists at the summit complaining that it was too warm inside. Now, the problem is the UN and all the climate activists, the Washington Post, I don't need air conditioning and neither do you. This was previous years. And the New York Times, do Americans need air conditioning? I don't know about Americans, but UN climate activists apparently needed it bad in Brazil and they were upset about not having it. The ultimate was we redubbed the whole conference COP30 to Clear-Cut 30. Why? Because thanks to the BBC, and once again, not some obscure blog, Amazon forest felled to build road for the climate summit. Unbelievable. The environmental minister of Brazil actually said, we have to put this highway in, we have to clear cut all these trees, tens of thousands of trees. Acres of trees, not more than tens of thousands of trees, but tens of thousands of acres. We have to clear it so more people from around the world can come to the summit to see how we're saving the rainforest. That's literally the logic they use. And these are actual photos. Now, Craig Rucker and Peter Murphy actually went out. They actually went out to somewhere where the construction was going on. They had to go past military blockades and everything, so we got great video of it if you check cfac.org and Climate Depot. UN hypocrisy. This is Bob's Burger. This was in the food court at the UN Climate Summit. Day 2, according to Politico, sold out of hamburgers. Now keep in mind, UN report, cow emissions more damaging to the planet than CO2 from cars. Paging Will Happer, paging Will Happer. But when it came to that, what was missing from the menu? If hamburgers sold out, okay, you think, well, we know what they should be eating. The insects, this is the UN report, edible insects, future prospect for food and feed security. But they weren't eating it on the menu, and there are no insects on the menu at all at this UN climate summit. But we called it the UN's feculent framework. COP30 climate summit merged into crap 30. I hope everyone's finished eating. Have y'all done? Okay. I love the word feculent. Crap 30, UN demands participants not flush toilet paper in the toilets at the COP30 venue. Within the first day, toilets all stopped working. World leaders had no access to toilets for about 6 to 7 hours. This is the email they sent out, reminds all participants not to flush toilet paper in the toilets. Please use the bins provided for your disposal. So you can imagine it became a blank show pretty quickly. Think before you flush. I got to go on Laura Ingraham, Fox News primetime, with intellectual hero Victor David Hansen. He's very historical, very PhD, talks all, very intellectual. Guess what I got to do? I got to go hold up a roll of toilet paper next to him. But Laura Ingraham loved it so much, she clipped the show and just put my clip on her Facebook page and me doing the toilet paper gig. I was showing what banned material looked like at a UN climate summit. You weren't allowed to have toilet paper. So you have to ask yourself, will it flush? So that's what you had to do at the UN. Now, we're still keeping on the flush theme. This is the founder of Earth Day, 81-year-old Dennis Hayes. New York Times confirms the flush. This is his actual quote. Everything I've worked on in my entire professional life has gone down the toilet in the last 6 months due to Donald Trump. So that toilet works. And that you could flush the entire green climate agenda down. So that at least we have one working toilet. So 34 years of climate summits. I love this, spot the effectiveness. This is the original Rio Earth Summit Treaty, which we'll get to in a minute. This is the George H.W. Bush signed 1992, trying to beat Bill Clinton. And this is CO2. I can't get there it is. CO2 just continues to rise, and there's COP30 Berlin where we were. And I've been to 23 of the last 25 of these all over the world. And I think Craig Rucker, what year you go back? To the 90s, so I don't know how many you've been to. Can't remember how many you've been to, Craig. But all of this, it's one thing to claim we have a climate emergency and this is their solution, is just to keep raising CO2 no matter what they do. So the whole thing is hilarious. Net zero progress, 76% of our global energy came from fossil fuels, 23, it decreased it to 76%, 0.3 of 1%. And that's Chris March's chart, by the way. I think you may have heard of him. China built 2 new coal-fired plants every week in 2024. This is a great stat. It's 85% of 21st century CO2 will come from the developing world, China, India, and Africa. But we're told that we have to shut down our greenhouse gas machine. USA leads in CO2 reductions. If you care about this, because of natural gas replacing coal. We've been leading all the European signatories who shamed us. By the way, before the UN summit in Brazil, I think it was like 80 countries didn't even bother to submit their greenhouse gas emission. They had just moved on from the climate. So this is Bloomberg News. Years of climate action demolished in days. And timeline. Trump's environmental directors are gutting American and the agencies to deliver them. So it's been just amazing to watch. New York Times, whole world sours on climate. It isn't just the whole world. It isn't just the U.S., the whole world. How do we think about the climate future now that's marked by the Paris Agreement has so utterly disappeared? And that's a good word. By the way, every time they have a UN summit, it's billed as the last chance summit. Secondly, Paris was supposed to save the world. You had John Kerry, you had Obama, you had the French president, you had UN leaders, and Justin Trudeau, all going out saying, we've now saved our children and grandchildren will thank us. John Kerry signed the document representing Obama with his granddaughter on his lap. And then the next year we had to save the world all over again. How many times do we have to save the world? It just never made sense. Washington Post. Okay, I showed you that one. Jeff Bezos. Now this was interesting. Jeff Bezos, huge climate activist. First thing he does after right after Trump's sworn in, he ends support for the climate support group amid fears of billionaires bowing down to Trump. Washington Post editorial board. I'm not talking about a columnist. I'm not talking about an op-ed. The editorial board turns against it. They call them symbolic gestures. This is just a couple months ago. Symbolic gestures have become a political liability. Florida has chosen to base this on reliable, affordable instead of ideology. The Washington Post editorial board has destroyed the climate movement. They are so angry. Jeff Bezos transitions away. They panned Biden's EV mandate. Red tape have killed Biden's EV dreams along with weak demand. It's amazing to look at the Washington Post. They still have alarmist reporters. And it's by no means like a skeptical paper, but the editorial board really packs a punch occasionally that just shocks everyone. Bill Gates bailing out on climate. This is fascinating. Bill Gates says climate change will not lead to humanity's demise. This was right before the UN climate summit. He warned against the doomsday outlook, appears to have shifted his views. And that's, again, the New York Times. So how do you think people reacted to this? Gore v. Gates. And this was Al Gore shows up at COP30. Was he attacking Donald Trump? Was he attacking the denier? No, he was attacking Bill Gates. It was a great thing to say. Al Gore wonders if bullying Trump prompted Bill Gates to backtrack. Gore was disgusted with Bill Gates. Bill Gates, I believe he's now funding Bjorn Lomborg as well, which is interesting. But Bill Gates has lost it, Bezos has flipped. Those are two major billionaires, and a lot of it is just because of AI. UN Green Climate Slush Fund has been defunded. Our nation will no longer fund radical organizations. This is the UN Population Fund, the IPCC, a whole host of all the sustainable development. It comes like more than 60 organizations that they're trying to fund. I hope Congress follows up on as many of these executive orders as possible. But again, there's just no pushback. During Brazil, Nancy Pelosi held a hasty called press conference with a couple Democrats, and she actually said at one point, yeah, and we support what the UN's doing and whatever. She actually just said it like she couldn't get out of there fast enough. They were forced to show up at that moment. Senator Whitehouse did show up, but unlike previous years, the Trump administration didn't send a delegation. We declared ourselves the unofficial UN delegation at the conference since Trump didn't send anyone. But guess what Senator Whitehouse of Rhode Island was complaining about to everyone who would listen? He didn't get the State Department to pay for his ticket. He had to get an outside group to pay his first-class ticket. Was probably like $30,000. I know because I used to fly business class when I was in the U.S. Senate. I'd fly to Indonesia. I'd have like an $18,000 round-trip ticket, airplane seat with folding, bed and the warm cookies and all that. So that's what White House is upset is that the government didn't pay for his trip down there. So they're withdrawal the Green Climate Fund. Okay. This is American Energy Alliance. They do a great analysis, point by point. I urge you to look this up. March of this year, a month ago, 300 specific actions Trump and congressional GOP have taken to unleash Americans' energy. What has that led to? It's led to, in just 6 months, Trump has brought U.S. oil and gas production to its highest level ever. CNN analysis, USA is producing more oil than any country in the history of the planet. And what do we get? 3 protesters here? They can do better than that. That's the pushback. That's the only pushback you'll see. What's fascinating too is how once you pull the government incentives, once you get rid of all that, Wall Street turns its back on climate. 6 years after the financial industry pledged to use trillions to fight climate change, its efforts have largely collapsed. Poof, gone. And they'll deny they ever supported it. ESG, net zero, banking go belly up, Wall Street exodus, axing the 1.5 climate goal, by the way, which everyone knows. Richard Toll, others, UN scientists have just literally testified it's a made-up number pulled from thin air. JP Morgan left to quit banking alliance. There's no one left. It's been completely collapsed. State Republican attorney generals get a lot of credit for going after ESG in corporate world. They've had a lot of impact on backing that up. Et to Greta. Bloomberg News. Greta's Sweden retreating from its bold green ambitions. And this is just from January 2026. Energy is drained out of Greta's climate campaign, a broader deflation of green ambitions. It's just, you can't keep up with the good news. It's exhausting. Trump, an environmental hero. Offshore wind, we've had record mortality off the East Coast as these windmills go up in construction. We actually went on a boat out by Martha's Vineyard with commercial fishermen and left-wing environmental activists to protest the offshore wind. Trump ended up killing it. We call him the whale psychiatrist. And he's really been unbelievable. He really is an environmental hero because we're getting off of, we're going back to producing energy in America with the highest environmental standards, high human rights standards, and not outsourcing as an accounting trick to poor countries with less technology, less human rights, and less environmental standards. Saving the whales, 5,000 watts. So that's a big issue here. We are breaking wind, is what I like to say. But then I realized that may not be the best way to term it. But understanding the horrible year for offshore wind, Bloomberg, tide is decisively turning against net zero. It's just like everywhere you look, it's like you're being in a casino and suddenly all the slot machines are coming up winning. Now, the problem is you can end up losing too. So you have to stay vigilant because you don't know what's coming after President Trump's administration. Axios, the world's great climate collapse. The climate agenda's fall from grace has been, I love this, stunning in speed, scale, and scope. So someone gets aces for that. Well, I love that. That's great alliteration, 4 S's in a row. But just this is a corporate mainstream media as well. So this is unbelievable. Politico calls it Trump's latest climate rollback makes it all but official. We've lost the culture war on climate. And by the way, going back to the young influence, going back to reframing, that is where we needed to go from the beginning, is the culture war. You embarrass people who believe the government can control storms and weather and temperature of 50, 100 years. U.S. government has long recognized greenhouse gas as a threat, but major rules to address that have failed to stick. The left's strategy on climate needs to be rethought. You think? Trump has launched unprecedented assault on climate. Where's the pushback? Yeah, this is UK Guardian quoting me. In my 26 years, I've never seen anything like it. But what's interesting about this was at the Heartland event in Davos. We got to go to Davos in Switzerland. A Brown University environmental professor said, I never thought I'd have to even say this, Marc Morano is correct. This is an environmental professor at Brown saying that there's been no pushback. So a few of the hardcore climate activists are really disgusted and can't understand it either. Mr. President, okay, this was in Brazil. I decided you can't, I think Joe Bastardi was talking about calling up Donald Trump. Well, you really can't call him up, it's hard to do. You go on the network that Trump watches. I went on Fox and Friends live from Belém, Brazil, from the UN summit. You can see all the broken infrastructure behind me. And I told I said in my best Ronald Reagan imitation, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. I said, Mr. President, tear up this 1992 Rio Earth Summit Treaty. This was on a Sunday morning, live from Brazil. Within minutes, Donald Trump posts my entire video segment of that, and me calling for that. Now, I'm not taking credit, but, oh, hell, maybe I am. Well, less than 2 months later, political earthquake, Trump pulls us out of the 1992 UN Earth Summit Treaty. So that was one of the biggest things. This is the most foundational. In fact, you can see it's the bottom Jenga block. That's how big it is. Pulling out of UN Paris literally is nothing, because you just get right back in. You pull out of this treaty, and now we have a situation where, according to legal experts, you have to have a new signing of a UN treaty, and you have to have a new Senate ratification. It makes it much harder for a future president, Gavin Newsom or AOC, to get us back into this mess. So that ends the global climate scam. Oh, by the way, he's already submitted the letter, so it'll be, I believe, February of 2027. So we'll be officially out. And that is something they never contemplated in Trump 1.0. Second punch. He's ending the domestic climate con. Now, I saw Steve Malloy's presentation. It's kind of depressing about the legality. If he's successful, so I'll put the clause in here, and he pulls this off, pulling out of the 1992 Rio Summit ends the global climate scam for the US, getting us out of the endangerment finding ends a big part of the domestic climate con. Just so you understand the endangerment finding, it's regulating CO2 as a pollutant under the Clean Air Act passed decades before. And it empowers unelected bureaucrats at the EPA to do things that Congress never authorized by just reinterpreting a legislation never designed to regulate CO2. It gives them basically unlimited power behind the scenes to do anything they want. If they can pull this off, it's going to be years of legal battles. This is the battle to watch. Repeal endangerment finding. Trump just wiped out 17 years of climate policy. Let's hope it's successful. Government, and I love this is ABC News. President Trump has repealed the U.S. power to regulate climate in this country. Can you believe it? We no longer can regulate it because of this, this action they're taking. This is not only dangerous for the environment, but for your health. More on that in a little bit. Trump repeals U.S. government's power to regulate climate. Washington Post echoes that. I corrected it. Trump repeals U.S. powers government to regulate you. But the media still blames Trump for bad weather. This is New York Times this year. New York Times goes full witchcraft, psychs, and academic. Trump will cause bad weather. Actual quote on the hollow paper, the gray lady. Trump's greenhouse gas emissions will cause Trump heat waves, Trump droughts, Trump floods, and Trump wildfires. Hey, he loves having stuff named after him. Trump casinos. I think he's going to love a Trump hurricane. He's going to love that. It sounds exciting. Record cold caused by climate change. You saw Chris Martz's chart. Why not? Record cold caused by climate change, record heat. There's still danger, emerging climate. So I'll just finish up by saying, introducing climate death tolls. This is in the background. World Health says climate is an existential public health threat. Climate change is a killer. We don't acknowledge it on death certificates. They want to add climate as a pre-existing condition on death certificates. Canadian doctors have officially started diagnosing patients as suffering from climate change. Started with this doctor. It's a whole group of doctors. Lady suffering from heat stroke said she had climate change. Actually wrote it on the chart. You can already see the climate death tolls coming up. Of course, we already been through this, 99, 96, depending on how you look at the death toll drop. So there is no health crisis. But Harvard Public School, the root cause of climate change also increases pandemics. You see where they're going? Climate change agenda has entered the operating room, anesthesia restrictions, heart surgery. Cancer Society has actually come out and worried about the carbon footprint of cancer care, carbon emission of aortic valve replacement. Would you go to a doctor who said, we need to replace your aortic valve, but we have a low carbon option, your insurance won't cover it, and it may not last as long, but you'll be saving the planet. Would you go to a doctor like that? But they have doctors' toolkits, so this is what they're doing. Beneficial blood sicking. Matthew Lau, bioethicist, NYU, wants to use ticks to infect people to stop them from eating meat. This is the Lone Star tick in Bioethic Journal. Remember, these are peer-reviewed journals. You don't question the science. Prevent the spread of tick-borne allergy, also mortally imperceptible. This is where they make you use a tick to get you infected, make you allergic to meat so you won't eat meat. Science gets more and more desperate. Humans are fueling global warming by breathing. This is actual peer-reviewed study. Human breath contains small, elevated concentrations of methane and nitrous oxide, both of which contribute to global warming. Now, Will Happer, I don't even know if anyone could debunk that. So, you are the carbon they want to eliminate. This is New York Times, voluntary human extinction movement profile. Now, in his defense, he doesn't want to kill people already living. He just wants us to stop reproducing so we sort of age out and die and leave the planet to the non-human species. So, that's the New York Times, the voluntary human extinction movement. Just when you think we were out, they pull us back into net zero. This is where we are right now. As the war in Iran may or may not re-begin, whatever's happening, climate activists appear giddy. The Iran war may help them impose net zero. They're looking at this as an energy crisis and a COVID-like crisis, a climate crisis. Reuters cheering this. Iran war energy sparks global push to reduce fossil fuel dependence. 2026 energy fear-mongering, COVID-style lockdowns. This is the International Energy Agency, hijacked by climate alarmists for at least a decade, or at least 7 or 8 years. Fatal Baral, the economist from Turkey, runs it. He's completely into all this. They're calling for basically work from home, drive less, all because of the disruptions in our energy, which, by the way, the U.S. is the best position we've ever been to deal with this war in the Middle East because of our own domestic energy, because of these policies. But But you can just see it's literally like the COVID template all over again. They're just looking for any reason to go back and reimpose this, and hopefully this will fail. 2024, the only true climate prediction. I think even the people skeptical of climate models will agree the election of Donald Trump could put the world's climate goals at risk. Fact check, true. And 2026, Trump has delivered a knockout punch, according to the New York Times. Trump erases the government. This is the New York Times. The Washington Post said it, ABC News. They love this. Trump erases the government's power to fight climate change. What power did they have? But anyway, summary of what killed the climate movement. Now, I say killed. I just want to caution, there's billions of dollars, corporate, academia, decades. It will rise again. I think it's going to be in the public health. It's going to be opportunistic. They're going to have to regroup. It's not going to be in the same form, but overreach on climate, appeal to authority, Trump flipping the narrative, very important, AI data centers, the needs for power, decades of failure of green energy. People could evaluate it, all the costs, the whole idea of solar and wind replacing fossil fuels. It hasn't happened. Burnout of climate activist messaging. You can only go so far with the tipping points, and we talked about that the other day in our panel. So with that, New York Times, climate change denial sees a resurgence in Trump's Washington. Wait, this is today. Oh, there's a Washington, New York Times today. This is the actual conference. Great headline. Climate change denial sees a resurgence in Trump's Washington. And I think someone can talk about how the New York Times claimed there were only dozens of people here at first, and then they corrected it. But finally, I saw this in Davos, and I leave you with this. That's the car. It's about the size of a lawnmower with a roof. If it weren't for Donald Trump, you'd all be driving this car. So anyway, with that, it's the great resist. We've got to be vigilant. We've got to build on this. We are in the best position we could ever hope for in the last 50 years of fighting environmental and climate extremism. Don't let your foot off the pedal, or I should say off the flusher. Let's keep flushing. Thank you. All right.